Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Amplify Your Business. Today, we are filming this actually on International Women's Day, which is just absolutely perfect once you've met my guest today, who is Heather Roberts. She is the founder of Extraordinary Women, as well as the host of a podcast called Boundaries, Business, and Boobs. Okay, so welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you so much for having me, Lance. I'm so excited to be here, especially on International Women's Day.
Yeah. And so this is the thing. I didn't even realize this until we started talking before we hit the record button, what your business is really all about and how much, I mean, this is what you do. You're supporting women entrepreneurs, right? And
Yes.
Here we are talking about International Women's Day or filming it on International Women's Day. So it's just absolutely perfect in terms of timing. So I'm really excited to have you as my guest here today. Now, before we get into all of that, though,
Okay.
I want you to tell me what, in your opinion, I think you said you've been an entrepreneur since 2007. So in all of those years, what's your opinion in terms of what are three things that every entrepreneur needs to know or understand so that we can be better entrepreneurs?
First is learn to say no, because you can't be all things to all people. The second is learn to delegate. We must delegate. And the third would be remember that your business is a separate entity from yourself. You are not your business. Your business is its own living and breathing entity.
Yeah. And that's, I'd imagine, kind of teasing into some of the work that you do with people around that boundaries aspect that is in your podcast, right? Because that's all about setting those proper boundaries. And I know as an entrepreneur myself and other entrepreneurs that I get a chance to talk to, we are probably some of the worst people for setting boundaries, I think, out of any segment of our population.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It is add between, being an entrepreneur and then being a mother on top of it. And let me tell you, it is like the perfect recipe for no boundaries.
Completely, right?
Yeah.
What I guess let's lead right into this. So what is it that your business, Extraordinary Women, what is it that you do there? What are you trying to accomplish? And I know that the podcast is related to that, so it's all kind of all in one. So tell me a little bit about what you do and how you help people.
So I work with highly successful female entrepreneurs who are mothers, and I help them create a business and life that works with them and together. For decades and decades, we as women have been brought up a certain way. And then if we become an entrepreneur, it was supposed to look a certain way.
Yeah.
But it's reality check, friends. It doesn't work that way. And so many women are trying to people please and trying to, meet everybody else's expectations, that they get to the point of they're about it burnout. And what I do is work with them to make sure that they're the director of their own life and that they're just not an actor in the play. And we do this through, looking at systems and relationships and time management and, obviously boundaries is a huge part of it, but there's a kind of a deep dive that happens, and understanding that just like each human being on this planet is different, the way that you have a business, run your family, volunteer, or whatever is going to look different than that way I do it. And that's the way it should be, right? And I think that is one thing that is universal. It's not just a male-female thing, but it's that we really need to be creating businesses that work for us and it's not against us.
Yeah. And before we hit the record button, you described yourself as a business and boundaries mentor to these people, right? To these women who are trying to juggle all the things that women have to juggle. Yeah,
Yeah, and
mothers.
that's how I really look at it. I don't feel that I am like a life coach or a business coach. It's almost like a special little place in between where the little magic happens.
Yeah.
And I am really fortunate because I've been a serial entrepreneur. The extraordinary women, I'm very, I don't want to work with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I want to reach them so that they hear the message that there's a different way. But I really thrive in that deep connection,
Yeah.
and really understanding an individual and what that individual needs and how it needs to look for her. So I'm super fortunate for that, that I get to have the opportunity to do that.
So now I love how niched down you are because, as you know, the saying goes, the riches are in the niches.
Mhm.
But it also allows you to do that deep diving that you're saying that you really like to do. You like to have those deeper connections with the
Mhm.
people that you're working with, but at the same time, try to reach a broader audience. And that's where the podcast must come in as well.
Yes.
I haven't listened to an episode yet, but I presume you're having conversations with women
Mhm.
who are entrepreneurs, mothers, and they're having some challenges, and you're
Yeah.
working with them to deal with that, or talking about some of the ways that they've overcome some of those challenges. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
It is. So the women that I interview on the podcast are for the most part, on the other side. So they have figured out, what works for them and how it looks. And so what we really do is we talk about,
Mm.
from their journey, like, where did you start? What were some of the stumbling blocks along the way? When did you realize that this was the line in the sand and something had to change? And what did you do?
Yep.
And so that's what we really talk about on the podcast. And with that, the intention is to let other female entrepreneurs understand that, look, I've interviewed all of these women and not one of them has done it in the same way. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the key takeaway, is that there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat, so to
Yeah. And
speak.
so, like, talking about boundaries in general, like we said at the beginning, is all entrepreneurs struggle with this, for sure. And so, I would love to hear what advice you give, or what would be some of the top thing or
Mhm.
two that entrepreneurs in general could do, or more specifically women, if you wanted to get that
Yeah.
specific as well, because we have a lot of women that listen to this show as well.
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I do is, when I give talks or even on my podcast, I ask every single person the same question, which is, how do you define boundaries for yourself?
Okay.
And that really is the launching pad, because I can guarantee you it's going to be different for every single solitary person, because that's what it's been so far. I have had no repeat traffic on the definition of it. So once you decide what boundaries look like for you, then it becomes let's implement some of them. And so, I look at it is that there are three components of boundaries. There's trust, alignment, and balance.
Okay.
And when you have all of those, you have what I call space. And for me, it's space to be able to breathe, because if I can breathe, then I can think. And if I can think, then I can create. And creating can happen in many different forms. It doesn't have to
Mm.
be, writing or drawing or whatever. It can be creating a product, it can be making dinner. I don't care what it is for you. But so it really starts with defining boundaries for yourself.
Yeah.
The second thing is, um, to understand that you are worth having boundaries. Your
Mm.
self worth is more important than anything else. And that can be a really hard concept, especially for women. We put our self worth in a lot of different things. Male entrepreneurs tend to put their self worth in their business. And if there's stumbling blocks in their business, their self esteem, goes with that. So it's really about recognizing the importance of self, and confidence.
Excellent.
When you can do those things, then you are able to more efficiently and effectively stick to the boundaries that you've created. And I think the third thing is really around team and expectations and delegation. We need to make sure if you bring on, even if it's just one team member, that, and it could be a VA, it can be whatever, that you empower them to do the job that you are asking them to do.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake of, they say they want to let it go, but then they don't, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
pull it right back in. And that causes a lot of disruption and friction in your business. So you need to let it go, but also have check-ins to manage it along the way.
Yeah.
So, but those are the things that I think are the constant day-to-day struggles.
So when you were the first couple, when you were talking about those, the image that popped into my mind, because I was just on a plane just on the weekend, is, when they're going through the safety instructions and so on, and you're supposed to put the mask on yourself before you put the mask on somebody else. And that
Yep.
very much is the boundaries and self-worth part of it. It's like, no, like I know I have to do this. I
Mm-hmm.
am worthy of this, and I have to be good here. I have to be able to be comfortable with who I am, the boundaries that I've set, so that I can be set up for success, so that I can then help the other people that are in my life, right? And women
Exactly.
even more so have that desire or need, or just by default, a lot more people, I think, in their lives that they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to help,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
who are relying on them, right? So it's about getting
Mm-hmm.
that safety mask on yourself, the
That's
air
right.
mask first, right?
Yep. That's it. You nailed it. We have to
Yeah.
take care of ourselves first.
Yeah, really cool. So now tell me a little bit more about your entrepreneurial background, because you were saying that you have been an entrepreneur since 2007,
Mm-hmm.
but Extraordinary Women in your podcast has been something that has only been in the last year or so, but
Mm-hmm.
you've done a lot of things in between that time. I'd love to hear you just explain a little bit more about your background.
Yeah. So for the first 14 years I was married, I was the stay-at-home parent. Um, and in 2007, my husband had been in corporate and we moved all over the place. In 2007, we made a decision together to, as I say, we left corporate because it was, at that point, it was just as much a decision for me.
Yeah.
And we kind of almost by accident founded a agency that helps home decor and furniture suppliers grow their e-commerce sales channel. So this was for companies that wanted to sell to Wayfair, and it's before Wayfair was actually Wayfair.
Yeah.
Fun fact, and Overstock and Amazon and Home Depot and Lowe's and all of these. So we still have that business today. I spend about 2 hours a week in it, mainly leadership, marketing, or finance, just conversations. But it's scheduled, like it is scheduled on the calendar of when I do that. And then, other than that, the company has a great team that runs it.
Yep.
And so I've done that, and then along the way, I also thought it would be. I thought I really wanted to try owning my own product business. I'd helped so many of our clients with things like trends and materials and design and all of the things that also go into a product. So I started a decorative throw pillow company at the kitchen table with no design experience whatsoever, and really created a company that was centered around the idea of having affordable, durable, family friendly throw pillows, but that had the look and high end design of a lot of the aspirational brands. And so
Mm.
that's what we did. I hired an artist, and we created those things, those patterns, and those designs, and that feel. Within 2.5 years, it company grew to be a top 5 supplier in pillows for Wayfair,
Wow.
and yeah, which was amazing. Like, it's amazing. And along the way, I learned this really important lesson, which was I hated it. I did not like this at all. It was not my cup of tea. It never took a break. It never went on vacation. And, God help me on Black Friday,
Oh,
so,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I realized that I was going to, uh, I am a very systems oriented person, very operationally. So I had been putting in a lot of automations along the way, and just sped that up a bit. And in 2019, decided that I wanted to sell the company. And I was super lucky to sell it for an amazing, 7-figure plus exit, which
awesome.
which was amazing. The company's still thriving today, which is also something that makes me very proud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what kind of gave me the launching pad to have some time and space to really say, I'm really tired of hearing the conversations of women and this you should relate. So when you walk up to someone and you would be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And they're like, "Oh my God, it's so crazy.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
this soccer practice, there's this play at the school, there's this at the church, there's this, and oh my God, my mother-in-law's coming to town, and da 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 da." Da. And I'm like, breathe, breathe, and I unfortunately learned that lesson the very hard way myself. So that's where I was like, this doesn't feel right not to say, okay, we've got to stop. We've
yeah.
got to stop. We've got to take that breath.
So now tell me, in your life then, when did you decide, or when did this moment happen for you where you're like, I need to slow down? Because
Yeah.
you lived that, right? That
Oh
was who
yeah.
you were. You had all those things happening. You're running this throw pillow company. You've got the agency as well that you're involved with. You've got the family commitments and
Oh yeah.
everything that comes along with that. And so you must have hit the wall at some point.
I did. It it happened. Well, the story begins at 3 a.m. My husband was traveling and had traveled a lot at that time, and it was 3 a.m. And we had, at the time, our children were in middle school and high school, so they were on all of the sports
Very busy.
teams.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I was team mom, PTA president, running 2 companies, volunteering, and I have parents who were in not great health and so forth. But it's 3 a.m. and I am sending an email out about the PTA function or thing that was happening. I can't even tell you what this stupid email was about now. It was at 3 a.m. And the reason I know that is because the next morning, I was up for the day at 3 a.m. It wasn't like I hadn't gone to sleep. I had woken up and I was already, laptop next to me, boom, started working. And it was the next morning and I was at the kids' school, and the head of the upper school comes up to me and says, "Well, what in the hell are you doing emailing at 3 a.m.?" And I was like, oh my God.
Hmm.
It was just such a literally like this, oh my gosh. So, this feeling, like it was almost like it trickled from the top of my head all the way down to my toes. And
Yeah.
I
The
realized
realization,
like
right? Yeah.
this was out of control. And so the first thing I did was I hired my very first personal assistant and or what you may now call today house manager.
Yeah.
Um, so, and she was life changing. Like she was life changing. And I made a decision to not give up the commitments. I decided to hire so that I could fulfill the commitments that were important to me. And in that, I've I found my life back again. I mean, and
Hmm.
since that time, I will never not have, a house manager. Like it is a non-negotiable for me. I actually have a girlfriend who said she'd rather not eat than not have her house manager. Like it's like, I'm like, I understand that feeling. So yeah. So I think that was my big aha and my best lesson. And I think ironically, a lot of entrepreneurs think, women in particular, think their first hire should be like a VA of some kind.
Hmm.
And I actually say you need to hire your own personal assistant first.
Yeah. For all aspects
Mm-hmm.
of your life then, right? Is what you're
Oh
talking
yeah.
about. That's the difference between the VA and the house
Yep.
manager, essentially,
Yep.
right?
Yep. So in my case, and it can look a little different for each person, but for me, the one I have now actually does all of the house cleaning. She does laundry. She will cook if I want her to. She does all of the shopping, all of the errand running. She takes my parents to their doctor's appointments. My kids are now, in their 20s, so I don't have as much of that. But all the other parts of my, she makes appointments for us. She handles all of the car stuff. She just takes care of life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it makes it so nice because I don't have to worry about, okay, dad has an eye appointment, mom has this, how can I coordinate it? She is literally my right hand.
yeah. And it's interesting because sometimes I get so overwhelmed with all the decisions that I have to make as the founder, the CEO of our agency, and we've got 25 people so it's not huge, but
Right.
there's enough where there's always somebody needing a piece of me, right? And
Yes.
having to make those decisions, and that is the part where sometimes I just get paralyzed almost, where it's just like I
Mm-hmm.
can't handle making one more decision. And so where the I guess the friction occurs is more on the personal side of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I'm hardwired any different than most other entrepreneurs. And like you mentioned, male entrepreneurs that really kind of focus on the business, and that becomes a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of the definition of who they are in that. And so where if there's something that kind of gives or that I have to give, sometimes that's where the explosion kind of
Oh
happens,
yeah. Oh
is on
yeah.
the personal side, where
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I can't think of another, like I don't know what we're going to have for dinner tonight.
Right.
I don't
Right.
want to think about that. I
Right.
don't want to think about, well, who's going to get, the one child to the baseball practice or not. It's just like,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. You need a
yeah,
house manager.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And they don't
yeah,
have to be full time.
yeah. Well,
So,
and see, then this is the thing. So I grew up my mother was a stay-at-home mother. She didn't
mhm,
work
mine too.
outside of the home, and so had the time. She had the ability to, do all the things from a family perspective,
Mhm,
and manage the house, manage the schedules, manage the appointments, and everything else.
mhm,
And so, from a traditional standpoint, we were very fortunate to have that.
mhm,
And my dad was free to pursue his businesses and really focus on the growth that he was doing there. And so but as soon as you transition out of that, whether that's a working mother or an entrepreneur
mhm.
mother and so on, we still kind of have this uh, thought process or traditional view of things, and how those
Mhm,
tasks still kind of fall on the female in
mhm,
the relationship,
mhm.
unfortunately. And so, yeah, you kind of replaced a lot of that strategically with the house manager.
Yes.
Now, was that difficult for you to let go of some of those things that maybe traditionally you feel like almost obligated to, or that there's a certain amount of who you are? Are you a good mother if you aren't doing these things, or a good wife, and so on? Were
Yeah.
those thoughts that came through, and were those really difficult for you to overcome?
Um, no, and I'm gonna tell you a story that really, I think paints the picture really well.
Okay.
If I didn't make a change, I was going to self-destruct. Like, I was gonna,
Yeah.
you know, and, what I did was, literally, my assistant would, for example, and this is the story I'm going to tell, is that when I had my assistant, I was what they called the team parent of a basketball team for one of my kids.
Yeah.
And part of that responsibility was making sure there were volunteers for various things and that the kids got fed a meal before their game, right? Pretty, normal stuff. Um, I put her in charge of finding all of the volunteers, and I put her in charge of getting the meals. And not only that, but she would take them to the school and she would serve them. And because I didn't have the bandwidth to do that, and what was more important to me was to be at the actual basketball game.
Yeah. To show up.
Um, and show up where I could show
Yeah.
up. And I will never forget. And mind you that my daughter, um, she was like late middle school, early high school when this started happening. And she was, of course, mortified. Mom, why do you have to have an assistant come? I'm like, here's the, do you want me to spend my time doing all this, or do you want me to come to your game?
Yeah.
Which is it going to be? So she eventually got over it. But yeah, so there was that. And I literally, after about the first or second time she had come and helped out at the school, I had a teacher and a parent say, yeah, so who's that person that you've got doing all your things? And I said, oh, that's my assistant.
Yeah.
And the teacher's eyes lit up and she's like, what does she do? And the parent said, why do you need an assistant?
Yeah.
And I said, well, because I have made commitments and I want to be able to fulfill those and I want to do the things that I want to be able to do. And I own my own business and I cannot be in two places at once. So I'm fortunate enough that I can hire somebody to be me when I can't be me.
Yeah.
And the teacher was just like, this is the greatest things in the whole entire world. I wish I had one of these. And the other parent was trying to make me feel bad about it. And
Yeah.
I said to her, so let me ask you this. Have you had to do any extra work because of it? And she's like, no. And I said, is your kid getting fed? She's like, yeah. I said, is your kid happy? She's like, yeah. And I said, then how do you care how I get it done?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's getting done. Done is the most important thing in this sentence. And it was kind of after that, word spread, like, don't mess with Heather's, assistant. Everybody be nice to Heather's assistant because she's making life better for everybody. So, and I've encountered that in a couple different ways and in different stages in my life. But yeah. So no, it absolutely did not make me feel like I was being less than. It actually made me feel more than that. I
Yeah.
was able to deliver on, I was able to do the things I needed to do for my parents and keep them, safe and all of that. And I was able to follow through on the commitments to my kids. I was able to follow through on the commitments to my husband because, she took care of the dry cleaning and the this and the that and, you name it. Right. And, so no, it actually has brought me quite a bit of joy
Yeah.
and pride.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's the way that it should be. It's just all when we have other people's perceptions or opinions as to how things should be, they trickle into, our lives a little more than what
Oh
it should at times. And so good on you for being able to be like, no, this is fine. This is totally fine.
yeah.
We have assistance in so many other aspects and so many other things that we do where people are assisting and supporting, and
Yeah.
and and there's no reason why it can't be within the
No.
home environment as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom was one of the biggest
Yeah.
um, challenges, I think is a good way to say it. Kind of a little bit of the, well, do you think you're too good? And it's not about that. It's about being fulfilled and doing the things that we can. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, completely. I'm curious because you've had so much success to date, with the agency and then with the throw pillow business, and now you're launching this relatively new business as
Hmm.
well. So a year into it, about,
Hmm.
and I'm curious, how do you define success now?
Success for me comes in small things. It's not about the hustle anymore.
Mm,
Um, to me, success is being able to go to Pilates in the middle of the day if that's what I want to do.
yeah.
Success for me is taking a month sabbatical off because I wanted to. I took September off. And I'm going to do that again and maybe even May of this year. I haven't finally decided. But for me, it's success is those things plus yeah, it's not a monetary thing. It's a state of mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would think, from what little I know of you at this point, it seems like there's a really strong common thread, or two. One is the ability to help other people,
Yeah.
and the commitments that you make to other people, and other activities, I guess, right? And
Hmm.
just being able to show up and be there and get that done.
Yeah.
I would imagine those must be just really common fabric throughout your life.
They really are. I made the conscious decision that I want to make sure that I am 100% present.
Yeah,
It, every day in every conversation, in anything I decide to do, or whatever it may be. I just really, really am intentional about being completely focused and present on what I'm doing at the moment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Good on you. A question for you: if you could send a letter back to your younger entrepreneurial self with some magical time machine,
Hmm.
what would you have in that letter? What would you tell yourself, your younger 2007 entrepreneur?
Um, you are stronger, more intelligent, and more talented than you have given yourself credit for.
Hmm.
You have had life experience that allows you've had life experience that puts you at the table.
Yeah.
You belong at the table.
So, why do you think that 2007 entrepreneur, Heather, why do you think she didn't feel that she deserved to be at that table?
Um, I, like you, was raised in a very traditional household. My mom was the stay at home parent. My dad, it was just like you, that, my mom did everything and my dad went to work, and for the first, 14 years I was married, we, you know, in the first 5 years, we moved 6 times and had 3 children.
Wow.
So, yeah, and we'd owned 4 houses. So
Yeah,
crazy. Like it was crazy.
that is.
Crazy is in, like, we'd lived someplace 6 months and 9 months and 13 months and 18 months. And then,
Yeah.
and then we landed in one place for much longer. But I had felt, because of the way I think I was raised, that I had no business being in the professional world,
Hmm.
that I didn't have the skill set. Now, what I know now is I raised money for our town. I organized PTAs. I co-wrote a church cookbook. I kind of was you know, I did all of our family finances and organizing and you name it, right? I did
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And those skills are transferable.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah.
You have to learn some other things, but the basic core is there. I've always been a very, now I say I have a very operational mindset. I can
Mm.
easily break something down, and say, this is how we can go about fixing it. That is something that comes natural. I didn't realize that that was something that wasn't natural to everybody when I was staying at home with the kids. I thought
Yeah.
everybody did that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's your superpower, probably, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Really cool. I'm
yeah.
surprised that after those experiences, you didn't actually start a moving company or something, because
I
that
know.
seems to be where your expertise was, packing and moving, probably.
I actually, we were lucky because this is back in corporate days where, they pack you
Ah,
and they move you.
yeah, yeah,
So, my superpower was finding schools for my children,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
Gotcha.
and reestablishing that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us today, and some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. I'm curious if you would be open to sharing any contact information, if there's anybody out
Oh,
there who
yeah.
would like to connect with you to learn a little bit more about you, and maybe specifically if there's any women in the audience who are entrepreneurs who are really having that boundary setting challenges and
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to juggle everything. what's the best way for them to reach you and connect with you?
So you can do it a couple ways. The first is you can reach me on Instagram. I'm at Boundaries Business and Boobs. It's just the name of the podcast. So that's an excellent way. You can also email me. Like I'm that easy and transparent. And it's Heather at extraordinarywomen.co. So
Awesome. And
those
if
are
they
the
wanted
two
to,
easiest ways. Yeah.
yeah, and if they wanted to tune into the podcast, where can they find the podcast?
Wherever you listen to your podcast. So, obviously, Apple and Spotify, Google, wherever you find your regular podcasts.
Excellent. Boundaries, Business, and Boobs is the name of the podcast. So search that up, ladies. And I think you're going to be in for a treat there. I would imagine there's some really good conversations that happen over there. And if you want to connect, extraordinarywomen.co would be the website to go to. So thank you again, Heather. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who are listening today and you really like this episode and want to dig into some of the archives of past entrepreneur stories that we've had the privilege of sharing here, just head over to amplifyyourbusiness.ca, and that's where you're going to find the archives. And of course, just like Heather's podcast, you can find Amplify Your Business anywhere you listen to podcasts. And so just search Amplify Your Business and you will find us there. Until next time, everybody, have a prosperous day.